Hello, my name is Marissa Williams. Today's date is March 1st, 2018, and I am interviewing Hazim Shohatee at the Ball State campus as part of the Virginia B. Ball Center Seminar, Muslims in Muncie. Hazim, thank you for joining us and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Our goal in this oral history project is to learn more about your life and about your contributions toward building a community with fellow Muslims in Muncie, Indiana. I'd like to begin by asking where and when you were born.
I was born in Sana'a, Yemen, on August 9th, 1968.
Can you tell me about your parents, their names, and their occupation?
My father is Mohammed Shohatee. My mom is Aliyah Najad. They're both from Yemen, born and raised in Yemen. My mom is, she started as a housewife, now she's a teacher. She still is an elementary teacher. My father he's an economist. He worked in different countries and different occupations. He started off at the World Bank, actually in Washington, D.C. in the 60s. And then he moved to Kuwait, where he worked at the Arab Fund and the Kuwait Fund for Economic Development. And later he returned to Yemen and was in the government. At the end of his career, he was a member of parliament in Yemen. Until he passed away.
What was it like growing in Sana'a, Yemen in the 70s and 80s?
I was actually born in Sana'a, and then because my father was working in Kuwait at the time, I lived in Kuwait till I was 10 years old. And then I returned to Yemen, sixth grade. I started when I returned to Yemen. So my early childhood was in Kuwait. It was nice. I mean, it was. I went to an American school in Kuwait. We lived in a good neighborhood. It was a good childhood I had, I must say. We used to go back to Yemen every summer while we were living in Kuwait for the entire summer period, 3 months. So always connected to Yemen. And then I returned to Yemen when I was 11, sixth grade. I also went to an American school. It was the Sana'a International School, it's called. It's basically an American school. It was established by an American. And I studied till ninth grade in that school. And then for high school, my father decided that I need to enroll in a public school to get a feel of, I mean, the actual community that I'm living, my home country. So I graduated from a public Yemeni school. Big difference than the private school that I went to before. It was a good experience. It was experience I needed very much to get the two worlds, so to say, the country that I'm originally from, where I was born, and where I ended up living in Yemen. So it was a good experience to, have friends that I still have. Unlike when I was in the international school, it was mostly expats, children that were in school. They were there for a few years and they leave. I'm still in touch with many of them, but it was different to go to a public school.
What was the community like in Yemen? What do you remember?
I mean, I don't know if it's very nice is going to kind of describe it, but it was a good time during the 80s in Yemen. The economy was good. There weren't any, so to say, problems. It was a very safe environment. It was a very economic growth. Everybody was happy. I mean, living wasn't difficult for most of the majority of the people. So it was very nice to live at that time. Traveling, Yemen it's a diverse country in terms of geography. There's the mountains, there's the beaches, and there's the desert. It's an agricultural country, so we got to travel around a lot in Yemen, inside Yemen. A lot of local tourism, so to say. So it was, I mean, enjoyable. And for me, having the background and friends that were, that I had from the international school, So I kind of, I mean, I could relate to the same age group of people living in the United States. The high school, the going out, the parties, the motorcycles, the all that. I mean, I enjoyed that. The sports, the soccer. I enjoy soccer very much, still do. But yes, and I mean that's why I mentioned the international school and the public school is because I mean I was lucky enough to have both worlds. I mean the public school was an all boys school, of course. The international school was a mixed school. So I mean I lived both worlds, which was good for me. You know, we had a library in the international school. We didn't have a library in the public school. Many different. We had 100 students in the class in the public school. We had 10 in the international school. So it was. I mean, but I mean, generally speaking, the climate of the country, it was a good time in the 80s.
How did Islam shape your family practices?
Islam, I mean, it's a major part of our life. My parents, I mean, not just my parents, my grandparents, everyone I know being in Yemen is a Muslim. But I did have, of course, in the international school, we had different religions, people, Christians and different religions, Indians, Pakistani, I mean, all kinds of Japanese, from everywhere in the world. It shaped, I mean, there's the guidelines kind of shaped the practices. We every Friday we used to go pray. My father takes us to the mosque to pray with him. It was every Friday we do that. Ramadan was, you know, a good time of the year. The 1 month of fasting. It was always a good family time. And but I mean, it was I had a religion class in school, and I saw my father and mother and what they did, and kind of learned from them. That's 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 the way I learned Islam.
What did you learn in religion classes in school?
There was, you're taking me way back now, but there was Quran classes where we read and memorize verses from the Quran. Um, and that was not only in classes. You know, at home, my father used to always read the Quran, especially during the month of Ramadan. We used to sit as a family and read from the Quran and pray all together, of course. In school, and the history of Islam was taught, the Prophet, his life, uh, what he did. So, you know, not very deep, but all the basics, I think.
What sort of lessons were imparted on you by your family, your father, your mother?
What sort of
Life lessons.
that I got from
Mm-hmm.
my father was a very educated man. He was actually, I mean, I was born and raised in Yemen. I'm actually a Yemeni American. I'm a third generation U.S. citizen. My grandfather moved to the United States. I mean, the dates are a little bit shady, but it's 1930 or 29 in that. He moved here. Yemen was, at that time, there was north and south. Aden was a British protectorate, a colony. So it was a very modern city. It was, I think, third busiest port in the world at that time, after, I believe, New York and Rotterdam or something. We live, my father's side of the family, my grandfather, he's from Ib. It's called the city of Ib. It's in the center of Yemen. It's close to South Yemen, close to Aden. So many people used to go down to Aden to find work. In Ib, they used to depend on agriculture only. It was quite poor. My grandfather was not from a poor family, but from the same standard as everybody else living at the time. You know, they were all, they weren't all poor, but they were in our standards poor, but they were all the same. So there wasn't, I mean, the wealthy and the poor. So he did move. He went down to Aden to find work, and then from Aden got on a ship and went to England, and then from England he got on a ship and came to the New World. He arrived in Ellis Island, looking for a better life, and worked very hard over here. And then he went back and he got married to my grandmother and had my father. And then he returned to the United States, and he lived here until he passed away, actually, in '94. He came back to Yemen, I think, 2 or 3 times during that period, but he remained living here. My father came to the United States when he was also, the age is a little bit shady. My father had an age that he used to say, I don't know if it was right. He used to, I mean, naturally make yourself a little younger. But he started in, I think, junior high. So he was a teenager. I don't know exactly how old, but he was a teenager. He joined his father. He came on a ship also, and I mean, the same way through England or France, I believe. And my grandfather was in upstate New York, Schenectady, New York. That's where he lived. And my father went to high school there and went to college in Georgetown after he graduated, School of Foreign Service. And then he did his master's in Harvard, economics and international relations. So what I'm trying to say is that he was a very educated man, and his education was a major part of our household. He married my mother in, I think it was '64. She can read. She did read and write, and I think she was going to school as a midwife or something at that time. He made sure that she finished high school, and which was becoming common. It wasn't very common at that time in Yemen. And then when we went to Kuwait, he also she did finish her high school. When we went back to Yemen, he made her go to university, and she graduated. She has a bachelor's degree from Sana'a University, which was not very common for a lady that already had 3 children and had a husband who was, doing quite well, working and in the government. And she was a little bit older, but he made sure that she did. So education was a very important part of our upbringing, reading. So that's, I think, the biggest influence that I have from both of my parents, especially my father. I mean, he was very big on education, and if you don't read, he has a different idea of history. He knows his history very well. He made sure. We sometimes used to quote history from a movie or something, and we would get scolded very loudly by him when you quote a movie instead of quoting a book or saying that I learned it from reading that book or this book. So I think he was very open-minded. He was born, and his early childhood was in Yemen, in a village, in a poor community, hard work, agriculture. He came to the United States when he was a teenager. Completely different world, of course, at that time. Completely. Went to school, graduated, went to college. So he had both worlds, and that showed very much in the way that he interacted with people. The family values, the respect for the elders, and this science, the education, the technology, the modernization. He had both of them, and I got that from him.
So you attended a private American school. Your grandfather visited and stayed in America, and so did your father. So what were your first impressions of America before you even came here?
I think, my mother tongue is Arabic, of course, but I think I learned Arabic and English at the same time. We used to speak English in our house. So I speak to my father in English. I speak to my mother in English. She speaks also English. My brothers, naturally, because we used to go to school together, so we would speak English. And we also spoke a lot of Arabic. But I mean, I don't know. There was always a connection. The first time I came to the United States was in '83, so I didn't come as a child over here. My father did live here when he was working in the World Bank. My older brother lived here for about a year, but when I was born, my father was already back in Kuwait working. So the first time I came was in 1980 when I was a teenager. I think I was 12 or 13. Um, but my father used to always come here when we were children alone to see his father, and I mean he would always because of the influence in his life of you know and I don't want to sound but like hamburgers, fries, and all that, ketchup. I mean it was I mean it wasn't something that was that I learned or that was brought. It was always there for me. So it wasn't cowboy movies. They were always. I mean, I always watched them. I always enjoyed it. So that's why when I mentioned to you that I went to an American school, is that if I talk to you about my childhood without saying that I was in Yemen, you would think I was somewhere here.
Moving on to education, you came to Ball State University in 1988. How did you decide to come to Ball State University?
My father was a very educated man. He went to very distinct schools, Georgetown, Harvard, and he actually had a diploma from Oxford. And he made me apply to all the big schools over here. Georgetown was one of them, of course. And at the time, I didn't get accepted, I think, to Georgetown and many of the other schools that he wanted me to attend. I had a friend in Yemen, an American friend who used to work in the U.S. Cultural Office. There was a U.S. Cultural Center that teaches English in Yemen for students and for government employees, and then they send them on scholarships to the States. He was a friend of mine. I got to know him very well, and he graduated from IU. So he told me to apply to Indiana University. It was too late for me to apply the deadline wise, and my father was already, worried that I'm not going to get accepted. And then I came during that summer to upstate New York to see my grandfather, and this friend of mine, the U.S. cultural attaché at the time, he was teaching a summer class at Ball State. I called him when I was in New York, and he said, "Oh, I'm in Ball State University in Muncie teaching a class. Why don't you come and visit and apply over here? It's a good school." So I did. I actually flew over here. I stayed here for I think it was about 3 days or something. I met the admissions office, and I applied, and I actually got accepted. So that's how.
What was your major?
I started off as a pre-med. Again, my father wanted me to be a doctor, a physician. And I kind of said, okay. I mean, it was, I don't know, I wanted to come and study here. I wanted to be on my own. So, what he said, pre-med, I said, pre-med. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I started off as a pre-med major. I studied pre-med for 2 years, chemistry and physics and biology. My grades weren't pre-med standard or medical school standard, and I mean, I honestly didn't know what I wanted to study, and I kind of took, what my father wanted me to study, and knowing that it is a good major, a good future, but apparently it wasn't something that I really wanted, so my grades weren't really up there. My father was paying for my education, so I couldn't. The first year, I didn't have the courage to tell him that I don't want to study pre-med, I don't want to study medicine. So I continued to the second year. And then after that, I went back to Yemen during the summer, and I told him I don't want to study medicine. and he was paying for my education. I've already was here for 2 years, so I decided to finish a chemistry degree, to get a chemistry degree. I actually graduated with a Bachelor of General Studies, but chemistry was the major area of my study. I missed the Bachelor of Science in Chemistry by one class that was only offered in the spring, and I had to stay another extra year, and it was not going to work for me to stay another year. My father wanted me to graduate that year and to return to Yemen to start. I mean, my career in Yemen at that time, it was '93. Yemen was north and south. Yemen was unified in 1990. There was a lot going on after the unification, lots of investments coming, lots of infrastructure being built, so lots of opportunities. And my father wanted me to be a part of that.
Within your 4 years at Boston University, did you join any
Five.
Five? Okay, sorry. Did you join any clubs or student organizations?
I played soccer. I was on the soccer club for I think 3 years or something. Organizations, no. I mean, there was a Muslim student organization. I was, I guess, a member of it just by default, but I wasn't. I didn't hold any position at any of the organizations.
Did you have any friendships with Muslims or non-Muslims?
Oh yes, of course. Uh, the friendships. I mean, they were. I mean, because they're Arab, not because they're Muslim. They are Muslim because they are Arab. But I mean, and that's not necessarily. Of course, there are non-Muslim Arabs, but it's when you are. I mean, when you're here and you meet someone on the street that that you know is an Arab, and he knows that you're an Arab, you tend to become friendly very quickly, and that was the case actually. I mean, during the orientation there was one or two students. One of them was from Sudan, and one of them was from Kuwait, and we immediately became friends. And actually, I mean, just to give you an idea, my friend from Kuwait, he was here. He wasn't in the orientation. He was actually just driving by, and he saw us during our orientation walking on campus, and he stopped and he came down and said hello, and what's your name and where you're from and all that. And the next day I moved in with him. So I mean, that will give you an idea of how quickly, and until I got my apartment. But I stayed with him for, I think, a week or two, gave me a key to his apartment, and told me, you can use my car if you like. And so that's something. So it's not because he was Muslim, because I think because he was Arab.
Did you face any discrimination based off of your ethnicity or your religion?
No, not really. Never, to be honest. I mean, not that I was very aware of. No, it was a different time also. There was no internet, first of all. There was not much cable news and all that. So it was a different time. It was a good time, I think.
Moving on to coming to America or actually Muncie for the first time. When did you come to Muncie?
88.
What was Muncie like in 1988?
I liked it very much. It was a very friendly town. I mean, I was upstate New York, Schenectady, where my grandfather and my father lived. It's a small town also. I think it's even smaller than Muncie. It's a GE town. Everybody works in GE. And so, I mean, I knew that town, but I spent when I used to come to the United States, I spent most of the time in Washington, D.C. My father had a strong connection to Washington, D.C., being where he went to school and also where he worked. And he had a lot of friends over there. So we used to stay there a lot. So I was used to the bigger cities. When I came to Muncie, of course, it was a much smaller town or city. but it was very friendly to me. I mean, to be honest, I liked it. We went to the mall. I mean, my friend that was here, we went to Ball State and did all the paperwork for Ball State and all the applications. And then to go out, he took me to the mall, and I liked it. I mean, it was extremely friendly. People were very friendly.
You mentioned how easy it was for you to meet other Arabs here in Muncie. How did you meet other Muslims?
Uh, there was a mosque also at that time. It was not the Islamic Center that is in Muncie. It was a small house on Ball Avenue, as I remember.
1717.
1717 Ball Avenue. Yeah, it was a neighborhood. Lots of students lived in the houses next door, and that was the mosque. The first time I went there was with the the person from Sudan that I met during orientation had a brother here who has been here that was here for he was a sophomore at that time, so he knew Muncie a little bit better than us, of course. So he was the one that used to take us out, or if we go to a restaurant, he would know where to go. And of course, the mosque. We went to the mosque. Uh, so that's when, I don't know, but I think very quickly.
You mentioned the Muslim Student Association. Did you ever go to any events that they hosted?
Yeah, yes, I'm sure I did. I mean, my roommate at one time, who's also from Yemen, who I introduced to Ball State, he was the president of the Muslim Student Association at one time. So yes, when they used to have events, of course I would go. I would go with them.
Do you remember his name?
Yes, Abdusalam Atif. Of course, I remember his name. I just talked to him today.
Oh.
Yes.
Can you tell me about your memories of the Islamic Center or the 1770 Ball Avenue in the 1980s?
It was. I mean, it still is a small community in Muncie. It was a small community at that time. There were lots of us were students. There was just a few that were professionals working here, physicians and Ball State University professors, and some of the local American Muslims that are still here. Um, it was a nice small community that I remember Ramadan very much because we used to go have dinner every night over there. Um, People used to bring food. Of course, I was a single man at the time, so it was a good meal at night. So we used to go every night during Ramadan, and we would stay for prayers after. Um, Many times we would leave the mosque and go to one of the houses of one of us, and we would sit, have tea, and play cards.
How did the community practice Jummah prayer?
How did they?
Mhm.
Jummah is the same. Yeah, I mean it's the same everywhere. Same time, midday, and there's I don't know, a sermon or a lecture or that's given, and then we pray after it, and that's the way it is. I mean everywhere. But it was I mean it was, and it still is because it's a small community. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's friendly to everybody because it's such a small community, which is very nice. That's a nice thing about the Muncie Islamic community, and it still is. And I kind of once I think we talked about like the elections that we have. In most of the cases, the people that run, without being challenged by anyone else. They don't run against anyone else. That's how small the community is. So it's a friendly community because of that.
What was your relationship with fellow Muslims of different races and ethnicities and sects like Shia, Sunni Muslims in Muncie?
If I tell you, you might not believe. I didn't even know there was Shia and Sunni at that time, and I was a young man. I mean, we don't have this in Yemen at all. I mean, especially when I grew up. So I honestly didn't even know that there is a difference, or that there are two different sects. I just knew everyone was a Muslim. So no, even if there were, people from different sects, it was not apparent at all. We all had same events. We all prayed together. We all, socialized together. We used to have barbecues. We used to go to the reservoir. I think every now and then the Muslim student, yes, they used to organize a day at the reservoir where we go out and we, barbecue and we grill and we play soccer and just have fun. And everybody used to attend. So I don't know. There was no difference.
What about your relationship with African American Muslims at the mosque? Did they attend?
Oh yes, there was, and they were. I mean, and from, they were here before many of us came, the students, and we were. I mean, they were part of the community. They attended all the functions that we attended, and we ate together. We went out together.
What ways do the diverse Muslim residents come together to form a single community?
You mean in here, Muncie?
Yes.
I mean, when I arrived here, there was already the mosque was established, and I think there was already like a president and all that. I honestly didn't know, but it was a functioning mosque that was always upheld and clean, and so I just came into something that's already there. I wasn't a part of starting any part of the Islamic community.
What would you say are the greatest strengths of the Muncie Muslim community?
The unity. It's a united community. It's it's a small community, and I don't know if this, but because it's small, it's very united. I like it very much. We try to have more get-togethers. So there's a monthly dinner every month. Mostly everybody attends. It's a nice gathering. It's a very friendly environment. I enjoy it very much, and I think everyone else does. I take my family, my wife, and my children, and my kids love it. My wife enjoys it, even though it's only once a month. There have been other functions that the Muslim community has done, some in Ball State, some and just having a barbecue in the reservoir during the Eid, which is the celebration after Ramadan, or during the pilgrimage time. We do have a big feast and games for the children and presents, and so it's a very unified. Everyone does what he does, and there is that little time that we all spend together, so it's enjoyed very much.
Were there any obstacles faced by the Muslim community
Here in Muncie?
Yes.
I don't know any obstacles. I mean, there's no obstacle for me. I mean,
Were there any like the diversity of the views or practices an obstacle or anything?
No, and I mean, no.
Do you recall the roles of the leaders in the masjid? Who was the president? Maybe Dr. Mir Ali or anyone else?
When I was here as a student, I honestly don't know. I don't remember. But that's kind of an indicator of how much of a family atmosphere was there. There were elders. There were some of the American Muslims. They were in the leadership roles simply because they were elders, and there was also a few. Dr. Bahrami was also here, and there was some other doctors. Mir Ali was one of them, and some other doctors that I remember. I can't remember, but they were. I mean, they had the respect of being the elders, and they had the respect that they kind of dictated where everything goes in terms of the mosque. I mean, I'm talking about in terms of the physical appearance, the operation of the building, the bills, and all that. We didn't know about that at all. So there was no. I mean, there's no authority. It was just a family-like atmosphere. I was younger, of course. So now when I come to think about it, how did it run? I have no idea.
Did you have to adapt any of your practices as a Muslim when you came to Ball State
No,
University?
not at all.
What were your practices in Muncie as you were a student studying?
Well, I graduated, went back to Yemen, stayed in Yemen for what, I think 20 years, and I came back to Muncie. So that kind of says the impressions. I liked it very much. I enjoyed my time here as a student. I did not have any problems when I was here as a student. You know, I was part of the Muncie community as far as I mean, there was nothing that made me feel not welcome in Muncie or feel different. I always, and that's, I mean, it was like a home to me at that time. I mean, it was very much home. I actually had, I wanted after I graduated to continue to study, to do graduate school and live in Muncie and try to get a job and all that. But I had to return back to Yemen because my family needed me to be back.
Like you just said, you returned to Yemen after graduating. Can you tell me about your life in Yemen, your family, your work?
I went back to Yemen in '93. As I told you, it was after unification. The country was, it was a busy workshop at that time. Lots of foreign investments were coming in, lots of building going on, lots of construction, lots of activity of importing. And I actually, when I told you I wanted to stay here and continue my studies, so I had an agreement with my father that, he told me, come back to Yemen and you can start your own business. There's lots of opportunities, so why don't you come back and start your own business? I'll rent the office space for you and you can do what you like. He kind of to attract me to go back, and I did. When I did get back, I started my own business. 93 to 94, the political situation kind of was getting a little bit murky in Yemen, and we actually had a civil war in 94. It was, you can have a brief war, but it was a brief, I think it was 2 months of fighting. And then everything went back to normal. And then starting from 95 and 96, that's when it was, the economy was growing and, foreign companies were coming in. And that's when I actually began my private business. I had a consulting business. I worked a lot with foreign companies coming into Yemen, seeking contracts in construction or selling their products. I worked as a representative, as a consultant, to kind of introduce them to the country and help them with their feasibility studies, market studies, and show them around and also introduce them to opportunities that might come up. I worked a lot with American companies, and having the American background, the American education, the language, obviously, and also being well established in Yemen helped me out a lot. And I did quite well, actually, in my consulting business. I focused on the oil and gas sectors, and there was lots of exploration going on at that time, so I did quite well till my consulting business all the way up to 2008. Starting from '96. I came to the U.S. once at that time. I came to Houston also to meet companies and introduce them to the opportunities in Yemen. And actually, some of them were successful meetings that I had over here, and ended up in materializing that they did come to Yemen and did bid on projects and did get some contracts. So it was a good time for me. I was busy doing that. It was oil and gas, and I also sold other products in Yemen that companies tried to market in, and I would help them in. But the oil and gas was my main business. And then I also started another company. It was a spare parts company. I had a friend who lived in the Gulf in Dubai, and he was a representative of a German manufacturer of transmissions. They used to sell their in Dubai and in Kuwait, and I think in another Gulf country. They wanted to open an office, distribution center in Yemen. So I partnered with him, and we opened in 2002. And it was also it was rough to start, but when it picked up in a few years. Yemen has a long border with our Gulf neighbors, a desert border. Smuggling is very big, and we used to import and pay the tariffs, and have a big office and pay all the overheads. And we used to compete against people smuggling goods, in a car. He would fill up his car and smuggle it through the desert and sell it for cheaper. So it took a few years for us to establish ourselves in the market, but we did establish the product we were selling. It was a great product. People, I mean, most heavy equipment use that kind of transmission. So by the third or fourth year, I think we were well established as the genuine provider of this product, and also after sales. We used to have German engineers come in regularly and meet with our customers to help them out, and also show them the modifications that the gearboxes actually were going through. So that's my professional life till about 2008. My consulting business kind of dwindled down due to the political climate in Yemen. From 2006-07, it began to get worse. And foreign companies are always aware of where they go, and when they see that there is political tension, they avoid that country. Foreign investments stopped, and so I closed my consulting business in 2010. I continued with my spare parts till 2013. Should have closed it in 2010. It was 3 years of just paying rent and salaries and not selling anything, due to the political situation. And then the Arab Spring came, and everything began to crumble.
Can you tell me more about the political issues in Yemen when you returned?
When I
returned back from Muncie to Yemen in 1993.
It was, you mean 93? Yemen was just unified at the time. It was a North and South Yemen. South Yemen was a communist, Marxist state, and the North wasn't. So when there was a ruling party in South Yemen, a communist party that was, the only ruler, and in the North it was a little bit different. There was much more political freedom, and also an open market. So it was just a different, South Yemen was very communist at that time, in the 60s, early 70s, and then 80s. And actually during that time, during the early 70s and the 80s, there were on more than one occasion border disputes between the North and the South, simply because they were a communist state backed by the USSR at the time. And it was actually the biggest base for the communist bloc, for the USSR, in the Arab world, in South Yemen. And North Yemen kind of was the country in between South Yemen and the Gulf states, which were the pro-Western, or so we were like the buffer zone. And there was on more than one occasion border clashes between the North and the South, where the South would try to expand their communist ideas, and North Yemen would be there to kind of push back with the help of, just like the Cold War, two different camps, and unfortunately fighting in Yemen.
Were you involved politically while you were in Sena?
No, when I I mean, my family. My father he did work in the government, so he, he was kind of involved in the government. Um, I wasn't, and then I began to get more involved in our village. Uh, we lived in the city in Sana'a, the capital, but my father's side of the family, everyone in Yemen comes from a village, so to say, from a tribe. Um, and usually people remain in contact with their tribe or with their village, and always go attend weddings, attend funerals, attend always are in connection with, as we were with our village. So I was very much connected with our village, and I began to you know play a small role in the local council over there. It wasn't. I mean, it was all voluntary work, but not really political. But it was in local councils and helping with projects, and lobbying the government for projects, and lobbying the government for roads, for schools, for it's all voluntary work, but it kind of establishes a name for which I was working on establishing a name for me, uh, with the idea that in the future, if I do want to get into the politics or run for parliament, or we did have a local council election, but it was also not it, it was not a paid job. It was a voluntary job. So I did that to just get a feel of how it is to run. I did, and I won. It was quite, and I stayed for for a few months in the village. The village, it's a very small community. Um, Now, I mean, I was always very much connected to our village. In the 70s, I used to always go there. Uh, to give you an idea, running water, we had running water in our village in, I think, 83. We had electricity, probably late 80s. So everybody had a generator there was a community generator that they would start at 6 in the evening and turn off at 10. But we had donkeys, we had cows, we had farming, we had agriculture. I mean, I lived all of that. The agriculture, the plowing of land with bulls, the primitive tools for farming, uh, to have water that you pour into a cup and wash yourself. No running water, no electricity. Flashlights are very big over there. Lanterns and all that. So uh, yes, so I mean that's the village life, and I was very much I enjoyed it there. I loved it there actually. I liked the roads. It was very hard to get there. You need a four-wheel drive car. It takes you. It was 40 kilometers away from Ib, the city, and it just take us about 4 hours to get there. So it was very rough road, very rugged road. Not a lot of cars, not a lot of noise. It's very peaceful. I used to love it.
Can you tell me about meeting your wife and raising and beginning your family in Yemen?
I got married in '96, February 29th, 1996. It was a leap year. I uh, I I got married in a traditional way, uh, and again, my father is a very educated man. My mother is an educated woman. They both traveled literally the world. I mean, literally the world, both of them. And despite that, we went. I mean, they asked me, "Do you know someone that you want to marry?" And I didn't. So we went the traditional way, where my mom and the ladies in the family kind of uh, you know find who they would think would be suitable. And different criteria for that. It's first of all, the family that she comes from, uh, her education level, her physical appearance, of course. It's not. There are filters that they have to go through, and the way it's done is that they look for different brides, so to say, and it's all done in secret because you know when the ladies ask about a girl they saw, doesn't mean that she's going to get married. So it's always very discreet. They just ask about her. Did she go to school? Did she graduated? How old is she? All that. So that's the way we did it. My wife, my mom, I think, and my sister-in-law, and some were the ones that picked her out. They tell me about her. I get to see her, of course. Um, her family is close to our family, so they weren't people that we didn't know. Also from a very good family. Her father is a very educated man. So is her mother. Same thing. He went to school abroad. He studied in Italy and in the United States. And her mother was also, she had a college degree. The family is kind of, and we knew them very well. So, yeah, so I, I met, I'm trying to remember if the first time I saw, I mean, I know the first time I saw her, but if I saw her, like, sometimes they give you a picture to see a photograph. I don't think that I saw a photograph of her. So we decided to go to their house, my parents and I and my brother, I think, was with us, just to go have a cup of tea with her family and her being over there. And that's when I saw her.
What was it like raising your 3 children?
Four.
Four.
Mm.
4 children in Yemen.
It was easier than it is here, I think. But I mean, because my mother was there, my wife's mother was there, the grandparents were there, the aunts and the uncles and all that. So there were always, different houses that families that they could go and they spend time with. And so they went to a British school. All of my children, I took them it was a private school, not to a public school, I guess, just like I did. So they, from kindergarten, they went to English-speaking schools.
What year did you return to Muncie?
2014.
In what ways were you involved with the Muslim community in 2014?
Here in Muncie?
Yes.
I came to Muncie in 2013 alone, and then I returned in 2014 with my wife and children. In 2013 was the first time I went to the new Islamic Center. I didn't know that they built one, and I did meet some of the people that I knew, like Dr. Bahrami and his family. I knew him when I was a student here. Dr. Ali also. Some of the Brother Rashid, he was also actually he was always a part of our social gatherings and always part of our dinners that we used to have. So I met him again and kind of clicked back very quickly. So I mean that's how I went to the Islamic Center.
What was your wife's name?
Amal.
Amal.
Amal means hope. Amal in English. Amal in Arabic means hope.
Why did you decide to return to Muncie?
Yemen was home, and Muncie was home for me. So if I came back, I would have came back here. I have a lot of family up in Dearborn in Michigan. I have quite a bit of family in New York that still live in New York, but I was more comfortable coming back here. And Ball State also for I had applied to jobs at Ball State, and I was looking to get employed at Ball State and live in Muncie.
Um, After returning back in 2014 and attending the Islamic Center, how is it different from in 1983 or 1988?
Mm. I'm different. I'm older. uh, Not much. I mean, different faces. Uh, when I in 2014, the student body was a lot larger in the Islamic Center. We had lots of students from Saudi Arabia, large number of students. So it was a bigger community. Friday prayers, we used to pray in 2 rooms. When I was here as a student, we couldn't fill a room. But I don't know. I mean, there are like certain people that, because they're still there, they were there when I was a student, and they're still there. It's the same to me. I feel it's the same community. And now, I mean, the student body is much less. Um, it's not as large. I think we used to have like 200 or 300 students at that time. The past year, the number went down. So, I mean, I kind of, to be honest, relate to it as if I blinked my eye from then, and now it's the same community to me.
In 2017, you elected Bibi Barami as president. Can you tell me about this process of how she was elected and your response to her election?
Bibi Bahrami and Dr. Bahrami, they've always played a big role in the community over here. They've always been a welcoming family to everyone that comes here. I want to say Muslim and non-Muslim, but for the Muslims, they have always been very welcoming and helpful. I knew Dr. Bahrami when I was here. I didn't know Bibi when I was here as a student, and I'm not sure that she was here when I first arrived. I'm not sure, but I didn't, or I don't remember her, but I don't think I met her when I was here. I know Dr. Bahrami very well from when I was here, and his brother Tila Bahrami also I know very well. They have always been, they've always played a big role in the community. When I was here as a student, Dr. Bahrami was one of the elders and one of the people that had much respect and was very involved in the operation of the mosque, of the Islamic Center. Um, Again, it's not a religious thing. It's just, he's an elder. He used to invest a lot of his time. He used to invest, I'm sure, his money also in making sure that the mosque continues, and very welcoming to all of us as students. He was, in Ramadan, the food that would come and all that. They always played a big role in that. When I came back, they still had a major role, and I think they played a very big role in moving to this new Islamic Center. I didn't know about it because I came in after they already purchased it or built it, or I don't know how they. Bibi Bahrami was always involved in the social side also of the events that are taking place. She was actually, I think, before becoming a president, she was part of the executive board. I was a secretary also for, I think, 2 years when she was the social coordinator or the community coordinator in the community, and she did everything. She used to put in more time than I'm sure about me, but I don't want to talk about the other people, but she used to put in a lot of time and effort in all the functions. She was very involved. So when the elections came and her name was brought up to be president, there was no question about it. It was, of course, she would do a great job. She's been doing, to be honest, regardless if she's the president or not, I think she'll still be doing the same thing that she's doing.
When were you the secretary of the Islamic Center?
Okay, with dates, I'm not the best, but I think it was 2015 to 2017, I believe.
Were you involved with the Islamic Center in North America or the Muslim Association in Indianapolis?
No, I've actually never. I've never been to any other mosque or Islamic center except the one in Muncie.
What distinguishes the Islamic Center of Muncie from other masjids and other places you have lived, like in New York? Or
I mean, I don't know if this sounds not very good, but this is the only mosque that I've been to in the United States. I think I've visited in Detroit, in Dearborn. I've been to to pray. I mean, just I went there to pray once or twice. With when I go visit family, we would go and pray the nighttime prayer or sometimes the noon prayer, and leave. So over there in Dearborn, it's huge. I mean, it's like you're in, I'd say, Yemen. And I think there's even more people praying there than in Yemen. But other than that, I've never been to any other mosque but the one in Muncie.
I'd like to move on to your personal practice of Islam by asking, how would you characterize your own practice of Islam?
Yeah, I hope good. I mean, I don't know, I practice it as I have always practiced it, and as my father used to practice it, or our family used to practice it. Um, and that's, I think, the best.
When you first arrived, how have you improvised your practices in Muncie? What ways have you improvised, like with technology or specific practices like daily prayer or halal food or anything like that?
Uh, the the prayers. I mean, see now. I mean, I don't regularly go to the mosque to pray. Uh, I think the prayer. It's good to go to the mosque and pray for the, for, primarily praying is something between you and God, the way I believe it. The part of going to the mosque is the good, the benefit of praying in the mosque is that there's more people there and there's a sense of community, and that makes you more involved with the community that you're in. When someone is sick, you'd go ask about him because he's not in the prayer. When someone has a problem, you help him or you support him. Or when someone is happy, you share his happiness. It's the sense of the community, which I think mosques bring into the religion as a house of worship. It's a house of people getting together and praying. The actual prayer, it's something that's I believe it's between you and God. I, because of my work and because of my hours, I don't regularly go pray the 5 prayers or the 4 prayers or the 3 prayers during the day that I can't make it. In fact, the Friday prayers, I've been missing quite a few now because of my hours and being unable to get out of work at that time. So during Ramadan, I try to go there in the evenings, try to sometimes break fast, not always, but if I can. I enjoy Ramadan at home with my family a lot. We pray together at home, but it has been like this even in my family when I was growing up, except the difference in Ramadan. In Yemen, families would get together more. So when we would pray, when we break fast and then pray, it wouldn't be just my parents and us, the children. It would be uncles and their children and aunts and their children. So there would be more people. Over here, we try. We have get-togethers. Different families sometimes get together, or we go to the mosque. But yeah, I don't go much as I would like to, maybe.
Do you have the opportunity to pray at work, like leave your office or take a break to pray?
If I ask for it, I think I will. I never asked for it.
Have you adapted your approach to zakat while in the U.S. or Muncie?
Um, I the there's different kinds of zakat. Some I pray. I pray. Some I pay to the Islamic Center. They have a way of collecting zakat. Um, so that's, I mean, that's where I pay it. I mean, zakat is also based on, your wealth or what you own, to pay on it, the percentage that you have to pay, um, your assets, so to speak. So, I mean, I don't have much to pay, to put it out. But there are different kinds of zakat, especially during Ramadan, where you pay a zakat. It's charity, It's so it's always good to give when you can. Uh, I try to give as much as I can, uh, but it's something that it's how much you have and you know how much you should pay. It's something that you have to decide, and it's your responsibility to do it.
Have you been on Hajj?
No, I haven't been to Mecca actually, ever, which is, I mean, I would love to go.
Is there something distinctive that you or your family brings to the Muslim community in Muncie?
Distinctive? No, we're just, I mean, we're part of the community.
What teachers or scholars of Islam are important guides for you?
Important? None and all. I mean, I don't have any scholar that none. I mean, I read what comes across to me. I don't know. I mean, this is something also. Knowledge is important, and gaining knowledge, finding knowledge is important. And these days, it's very easy to research, and I enjoy doing that. I wouldn't take something that I hear from one scholar or the other and adhere to it necessarily. I do like to research more and more. I believe that you're responsible of your actions. Everything is out there, and you should try to understand as much as you can, with the help of course, people that know more. You can take advice, you can read what people say about certain subjects, and if it makes sense to you, that's the way I look at it. If it makes sense to me, I adhere to it. If it doesn't, I don't really listen to it.
What have you recently read or researched that does make sense to you?
Oh, that's a lot. I don't know. You get older, you begin to kind of ask more questions, which I think is good, and which I think is something that is meant to be. I mean, my belief, Islam it's based on knowledge, very much so. My father used to tell me this every single day. I mean, probably the first word that was revealed to the Prophet was read, from God, through the angel Gabriel. the first word that was revealed in the Quran, which is one of the verses, was read. That's how important it is. That and in the Quran there are so many verses that say, seek knowledge, ask, understand, and be responsible of what you learn. It's different when you're uneducated or when you don't have the resources and you depend on people telling you the way to do it. It's not wrong or right, I'm not saying that, but and it's different when you have every resource in front of you to research and try to understand yourself. So I enjoy, explore. Um, there are lots of different views, which I mean everybody knows. There are a lot of different views of the same thing. Islam, the Holy Quran is the Word of God. That's undisputed by all Muslims from all sects, from all countries, that it's the Word of God that hasn't been changed. It's the Holy Quran is memorized by millions and millions of people. So it will be the way that it is forever, simply because from generation to generation, people memorize it from cover to cover. It's and that's for a reason, I think, that it will always be the same. Because it has been passed on from generation to generation just through people memorizing it now. And there are literally, millions and millions of people that memorize it from cover to cover. Not me, sadly, which I mean I would love to. So that being said, being the word of God that hasn't been changed, that every Muslim believes is the word of God when it was revealed. It's the word of God today, and it's the word of God 1,000 years from today. It won't change. It won't develop into something else. It's the same exact words. Yet, for every generation, every time, it's, I sincerely believe, the right thing. I mean, it is true. So many of the interpretations that were written 1,000 years ago or something, now there are scholars that are having a little bit slightly different interpretations of it. Again, not that one of them is right and one of them is wrong, but for me, I like to read them both and make up my own mind and be, take responsibility of that, because I think that's the way that it was. The thing about Islam is that there's no intermediary between you and God. It's a direct connection between you and God. There's no holy people. That's what I believe. Some people believe otherwise, which is fine. I mean, it's everyone has a different. That's why in some cases it's not something to really share, because you might offend some people. But for me, I believe you have a mind. It's written the way it was written forever, and it will remain written the same. You should, and it says that you should, think about things that are written. Why is it written that way? Asking questions is not wrong.
What is the heart of Islam for you?
The heart? One God.
There's been a lot of misrepresentation and misunderstanding around the word jihad. How is this concept for you, or excuse me, what does jihad mean to you?
I mean, the translation, I think, is struggle. So that's what it means. I mean, you can, in Arabic, when you speak Arabic, you can use the word jihad when you're not talking about what everybody thinks you're talking. I mean, nowadays when you say jihad, it's a holy war, or it's violent. You can use the word jihad in Arabic in a sentence and talk about sports. That he's struggling to make it, or he's putting in lots of effort. It has become a word now that's linked to the holy war. Not to me. But I mean, we live. I'm a part of the world a part of a world that you know read about this, hear about this all the time, and have one picture that it's a holy war. So I mean, for me, it can mean the way I see it, it's struggle, and the way I read about it, and the way I know about it, and the way that every Muslim, I think you ask, would say that he knows that the greatest jihad, or the greatest struggle, is the jihad with yourself, against yourself. If you ask any Muslim, he will tell you that. I mean, that's part of our religion, is that's the greatest jihad, is you against yourself, bettering yourself. So I mean, that's what comes to my mind when you talk about jihad, more than what is unfortunately out there.
I'd like to circle back to the previous question with your answer about the heart of Islam for you is one God. Can you explain what that means to you then?
I mean, one God, the Creator, and the beginning, and then what follows it can mean, how did it happen? I mean, how did the beginning? How did it all start? That's the comfort I find in where did we come from, or what's the beginning, or what's the ending, is that I believe that there's one God, the creator of everything, and that's the way the universe started. And then the science of how the universe was created, I believe, how planets, the evolution. I also read a lot about that, researched a lot about that. There's a lot of difference about that in every religion, and I believe that I believe the science in it, and I believe that the science doesn't contradict in the Quran at all, actually. In fact, in some cases, it's very clear that that's the way it happened. There was a beginning, and then everything began to evolve into what it is now. So the one God for me is that you're born, you live, you're going to die. Everyone's going to die, and there is a judgment day, and there is a heaven, and there's a hell, and that kind of dictates the way you want to live your life, happy, or happy in a very easy way of using the word happy, but I think that's the way I look at it.
Have you been involved in interfaith activities?
No, I don't think so. Again, I have never seen people based on faith. I don't know why. I mean, because of my upbringing, I think, because the way my parents, my father especially, I mean, never was, what's your faith a question, or what's your faith really matters to the way I interact with you. It has never been that way, and it still is. So, I mean, I don't know, when I the word interfaith is it's kind of, you know, different people trying to find a common, which it is, but I don't see them as different people. I mean that's I like to talk about my beliefs, or I like to, you know, answer questions about people asking. In many cases, not as public as this, you know, on a camera. I don't mind speaking to, you know, with anyone about asking questions, and you can get a little bit more personal, simply because you know, people have different ideas, and people are, you know, should have different ideas of what they think. Not everybody will have the same idea, and sometimes people are offended, and I honestly don't want to offend anyone.
What is the importance to you and of your loved ones here being buried in your home country, Yemen, or according to Islamic burial rituals?
Um, the importance, it's not important. I believe. I mean, you're buried where you die. Uh, if you really want to be buried back, for example, my grandfather was buried in Yemen, but he died in Yemen. So he actually he returned to Yemen. I think it was '94, and he died about a week or 10 days later. So he and he in his will he said he wanted to be buried in the village, and he actually had a piece of land that um, he he made it it's a graveyard now. It was his property, and he said, you know, he wants to make it a graveyard, and he wants to be buried there. So he put it in his will that he wanted to be buried there. Uh, if I mean, you know, what a subject you're talking about. But I mean, I think wherever if I'm buried here or wherever I die, it's the same to me. I wouldn't know, I think, but um, the Islamic side of it, you know, uh, in the funerals, when you die, you're washed, you're wrapped in white, and of course, this is if you can. I mean, if you're unable to do it, it's not that you know, you're breaking. Uh, I mean, to be clear about it, which is very important, is that religion, and this is mentioned also in the Quran and many verses, it's meant to be easy and not to be hard. It's it, religion was never, or I think is never meant to make your life difficult. Religion is meant to make your life easier and happier. Um, and that's very important for some people. The way they think of religion is that religion is, you know, it's hard, it's a struggle. It's, you know, if you, you know, this is my personal thought. Don't share this, but you know, it's. I think it's very hard to go to hell. Uh, Many people see it the other way around. It's very hard to go to heaven or paradise. I think you have to be very bad to go to hell, and to be bad, you have to work on it. You have to try. If you're normal, you're good. I mean, that's just human nature, and that's the thing about religion. It's I think it's meant to make your life easier and happier. I mean, not just the happier part is very important. It's supposed to. So dying in any country and being buried in any graveyard, um, I mean, I would like to that people pray on me after I die, especially my family, and bury me in a graveyard where Muslims are, if possible. If not possible, I mean, I don't, you know, I don't find that something, you know, out of the ordinary. It's not. I mean, I would like to. I mean, but you know, the people that came where there was no Islamic communities. They started it. There is, for example, in Muncie now, and in I think just about every city in America or in every state for sure, there are Muslim graveyards. You are able to wash your dead the Islamic way. You are able to pray. I mean, so it's not hard to do that. But in wanting to be buried in Yemen or wanting to be buried here or wanting to be buried in wherever I don't want to say a country and then I'll be afraid to go there. Whatever country, but it makes no difference to me.
Earlier, you mentioned your mother and father both traveled around the world. What was your experience of coming to America, although your family has lived in other countries?
Uh, in my childhood, you know, I lived in Kuwait for some time, but I lived more in Yemen. I did go to Europe. I went when my father was studying in Oxford. We went to visit him. My mother, me and my brother. We went to see him for about I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks in Oxford. So I mean I knew Europe. I was I believe 10 at the time or 9, and I knew Egypt. That's the other country that I went to. Other than that, I didn't go any. I mean, it was Yemen that I knew, but I was because of the people that I knew, because of my friends, because of uh, my father's upbringing here. Um, America wasn't, I mean, something that I didn't know about. Uh, the movies, of course, I used to. I mean, I watched. If you name, you're too young, but if anyone my age names um, any Steve Austin, I was the $6 Million Man. I was a cowboy in India, and I was all of that. I that was my childhood. So I didn't know America physically. I wasn't here till 1983, but you know, I knew what to, you know, I knew football. I knew the rules of football. I used to play softball. We used to play softball in school. Uh, so I mean, that kind of is the difference is that because of my father being brought up here, he bought me. I had a New York Yankees jacket. He used to like the Yankees, so I mean, I knew who the Yankees were. Mickey Mantle. So that was the common name that my father would mention. I watched the Super Bowl, I think, in '82 or something in Yemen. We got it on a video weeks later, but yeah, I didn't know the score. So we watched it and we enjoyed it.
Can you tell me about your brother and sister, their lives now?
I have 3 other brothers and a sister. Um, my older brother, he's a lawyer. He did his undergrad in Jordan, University of King Hussein, I think it is. It's one of the very good schools in the Arab world. And he studying law. Um, my father has a great influence on us. My father wanted him to study his undergrad in a Muslim country, to study the Islamic side of law, because if he will be practicing in the Middle East or in Yemen, he would need that background. So he graduated from Jordan. He did his two masters in Georgetown Law School. So he did that after he got his undergrad. He came here and he did common law, I think, in international law or something, but from Georgetown University. My younger son came to my younger brother. He's 5 years younger than me. He graduated from Ball State. He lives in Abu Dhabi now. He works and lives there with his family. My older brother lives in Kuwait. He's a lawyer with the Kuwait Fund, I believe. And then my sister. We were the 3 boys. My older brother, and then me, 2 years younger than him, and then my younger brother was 5 years, and then 10 years later or 11 years later, we got a sister, Saba, her name. Saba is a Yemeni name. It's Sheba. Yemen is the land of the Queen Sheba. The biblical story in the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, and all the everybody knows the Queen of Sheba and the story of with King Solomon. Or she, and then I have a younger brother also who's 2 years younger than Saba. So they were there, like our children. When Saba was born, I was in high school, I think. So. She studied in Sana International School, just like us. She graduated from there, and then she went to for university. She went to England, to London. I think Leicester University. She got accepted over there, and I studied in the U.S. My brother studied in Jordan in the U.S. My younger brother studied in the U.S. and when it came time for my sister, my father had her apply, and she applied to schools in England, and she got accepted in Leicester, and he decided to send her over there. And it's not very common, to say the least, in Yemen to Yemen and in some other countries to send a daughter abroad, overseas, to go to school alone. Yet my father found it uncommon if he didn't do that. Having sent us all abroad to study, he felt that was the normal thing to do, was to send her also to study and get her education and see the world, if you like. But just like us, and I remember it's not a common thing in Yemen, so culturally, or I don't know what it is, and it's we objected to it. I objected to it. I told my nobody does that, and he was very surprised at our objection for his decision to send her. Extremely surprised that we would object, and he said, "I sent you all. Why wouldn't I send her?" And I think that that was a very logical thing to say. I sent you all. Why wouldn't I send her? And he did. She graduated from there. She's a lawyer too, very successful. She's married now, and she lives in England. My mother lives with her since she had to leave Yemen, so she's staying in England with her now. She's married to a British gentleman, Lewis, our brother-in-law, a very good man.
Since we started talking about the world, I like to shift our focus to world context. When you think about Muncie in a national context, what events do you recall when you studied here at Ball State University?
Again, it was a different time, but the one event that, of course, was the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, 1990, that I remember, and the CNN coverage of it. And I guess, when I used to go out in Muncie, and I say I'm from Yemen, not many people knew where Yemen is, or after maybe the Gulf War, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen sometimes, all these countries became more common names that were being used or heard on the news. So I think the Gulf War was the international event that kind of was an important event during my school here.
Now, about 20 years later, what national events seem significant to you personally as a Muncie resident?
As a Muncie resident, it's getting crazy, but in Muncie, the local or the national, events that are happening, I think, are more have an impact more than the international events. I mean, they are kind of tied to each other, but it's more of the what's going on in the United States, the politics going on in the United States, um, and as a result, what's going on in the world. But of course, the war in Syria, the war in Yemen, the Islamic State, all these things that have been popping up recently, uh, they they do have an effect on the way on you know. I mean, to be honest, again, when you asked about, have, I have never sensed or felt or had any anyone look at me in a racist way or in a different way, or luckily, uh, these events kind of fuel up that intentionally or unintentionally from people. Sometimes it's just again, knowledge is key, and ignorance is just the opposite. I mean, as much as knowledge can do to build, ignorance destroys. And we have a saying that one destroyer can beat 1,000 builders. So I mean, bad news, or something that happens in the world, a bad event that's tied to a certain race or whatever, and it shouldn't be, of course, does have an effect, unfortunately. And that the only way that will change is by the ignorance a little, going away, and people learning more on their own. And that's why the reading part, the learning part, the researching part, I believe is very, very important for people to know more and not kind of believe everything they say, everything they hear. That doesn't mean they shouldn't hear everything. I think you should hear everything, but kind of make up your own. What sounds right is right. What sounds not right usually isn't.
What do you remember about the events of 9/11?
9/11. I was in Dubai in 9/11. I was with my wife and children. We were on. We were there for, I think, 10 days. It was a holiday. We went. Um, I was having dinner with a business associate, an American from Texas, and his wife and children. We were going to a restaurant. So I was in the apartment that we were in, and I heard that there was something in the World Trade Center. But we were on our way out. I didn't really pay much attention. And then I thought it was a bombing. And then we went out to dinner, and I told him, "Have you heard there was a bombing in New York?" And he said, "No, I haven't heard about it." He apparently made some calls or something, and he said an airplane hit one of the towers or two of the towers. So I mean, that's why I remembered we were out to dinner with my friend, who I'm still in touch with. And then when I got back at night to the apartment, I of course saw the news, and the towers, I think, they were both hit, and I think they were all collapsed. And it was something I couldn't believe that was happening. We returned to Yemen very soon, and there were, you know, the way people see events or interpret events is different based on the way you were brought up, what you were educated, how your family reacts to certain events. It was a terrible thing, and for my family, I mean, the way my father reacted to it is that, this is unreal. This couldn't be happening, and it will have, many repercussions on the world that this is happening. It's a disaster that happened. So that's that. I mean, that's 9/11. I visited. I came to. I'm trying to think if I. Yeah, I didn't come to the United States until 2014 after September 11th.
Did you still have family in New York at that time?
Oh yeah, I still do, and in Michigan a lot. All my cousins, actually. I mean, now with all the events in Yemen, the family I have in Dearborn are more than the family I have back in the village.
Were they affected by 9/11 at all?
I think everyone was affected. I mean, it's no. I have cousins uh, that went to Afghanistan with the U.S. Army, who are police officers in Brooklyn, New York. Uh, so I mean, personal stories of people being affected, I really don't know. But you know, everyone was affected.
How did 9/11 change your life as a Muslim? Did it change immediately or over time?
I mean, no, it didn't. For me, it didn't change. I mean, no, it didn't. I mean, it didn't change for me. If there was any change, it was, you know, it wasn't a good change. It caused a kind of a rift between people. To be honest, you know, with people that were against, people that were supported, not just 9/11, but the things that happened after 9/11. You know, it caused a lot of differences to be, you know, to be out there in the open, and lots of extremist views uh, of the events.
What other events have affected you or have affected the Muslim community of Muncie, like the 2016 presidential election or the Muslim ban?
2016 election. I mean, I followed very closely. I was here in. I'm trying to. I followed the in terms of presidential elections. I followed the Bush Clinton in '92 very much. Before that, I think it was the 1984, I believe. Was it Walter Mondale and where I saw the debates and followed that. 2016, I followed very much because I mean I was living here and I watched all the debates, all the news. Of course, news is you know, there's hundredfolds more than what we used to see in the 80s or in the 90s because of the internet, because of the TV being on all the time. But I did follow it a lot, and it was a little different. Um, but I mean, this is America. It's the way the democracy operates, and uh, maybe people were surprised at the results. But you know, it's President Trump is the president of the United States. He's our president.
Did the Muslim ban affect you or the Muslim community here?
That never. I mean, it never affected me. It never. It was a joke. I think. I mean, just to, when Trump said about the Muslim ban, um, it's impossible to happen. I mean, first of all, it's unconstitutional. It's, you know, it was a campaign thing. I think that was used. It never really concerned me that you know, you know, I'm a U.S. citizen. My grandfather is a World War II war veteran, Korean War veteran, decorated. He's, you know, he's not just he's a decorated war veteran. My father served for 4 years. I have an uncle who served in Vietnam. I have cousins that served in Iraq war, Afghanistan war. They're police officers. They're, you know, this is America. You know, you are a U.S. citizen. I don't know where religion came in to having a Muslim ban or a Christian ban or a Jewish ban, or you can't hold a position because you are a Buddhist or you are a Christian or you are atheist or whatever. I mean, isn't that this is America? It's not about religion. So when the Muslim ban did come up, and uh, the only thing I saw that it resulted from it was all the demonstrations that were against it. So maybe maybe him saying that kind of stirred up more support uh, for to implement it. I mean, it's impossible. He can't do that. No one can do that. So it really didn't worry me. The immigration part. I mean, I do have uh, relatives, people that have immigration paperwork being done or waiting to bring in there. It is maybe a little bit takes a little bit longer, but it was never easy. I mean, people kind of think that immigrating here or bringing in your father or your mother was in the 40s and 50s. It was very easy, but I mean, in my lifetime, it has never been easy. I mean, there's lots of procedures to go through. Um, it's you need to prove everything. You need to document everything. There's more than one interview. It's not an easy process. So uh, for it to get stricter or harder, I mean, it's not a problem. I think it's always been difficult. It wasn't an open gate to bring in relatives.
What are your perceptions of the United States in 2018 as an American resident?
It's going to be interesting. I'll tell you, that's going to be very interesting. Uh, the 2016 election, I think, surprised many people. And again, it's a democracy. That's the way it works, and that's the way people have to live with it. Uh, as a result of the elections, lots of discussion has been going on. Lots of objection, lots of opposition to what's going on is happening, which is also a healthy democracy, which is normal. So 2018 will be, I think, a very important election cycle when it happens, to see, I mean, is what happened in 2016, was it genuine enough to continue during the midterm elections, or was it something that happened based on, I guess, great fireworks and some kind of, I mean, some kind of good character or something.
Muslim leaders have noted that in the wake of terror attacks like 9/11 or the Paris terrorist attack, that it can be difficult for Muslims to express a collective grief with non-Muslims and other Muslims when they are looked at with suspicion. Does this resonate with your own experience?
Yes, talking about the Muslim ban, I was at work and I returned home. I had one of my neighbors, a good friend of mine, I mean, an American, so to say. I am American, but he was waiting for me in the parking lot. And he's like, "Are you all right? Do you need anything else?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, I didn't know what was going on. And that's when they had when people were turned back at JFK, and then all the demonstrations went out to the airports. And I didn't know that that was happening. I was at work. So when I got back, and he was waiting in the parking lot, "Are you all right? If you need any help, we're your friends, we'll support you." I was like, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Oh, you didn't hear? They returned people on their flights back from JFK." And like, I don't know about it. So yes, I mean, even the terrible like the Paris attacks or any other attack, or when I honestly think the majority of people don't agree with the classification that's sometimes circulated in the news, that it's a Muslim, or it's he's a criminal. It doesn't really he's a it's a criminal act, and it should be dealt with as a criminal act. To generalize it is wrong, and I think the majority of the people know that. It is not something, when to accuse an entire race or entire religion of the acts of a of someone, a lunatic or whatever. It is happening with all the news and for political reasons, most cases. But I think the majority of the people don't really agree with that. I mean, when you see the demonstration that went out to the airports when this happened, it's amazing. When you see, there was a joke, I forgot, but when you try to ban something, what you are doing is making people more interested in knowing more about it, which is a good thing. And then when they do know more about it, Islam as a religion, if people want to understand it or learn more about it, it's not a problem at all. Nothing will be found in Islam that will surprise you as, how is that in there?
Does American Muslim characterize your self-understanding?
Characterize myself?
Yeah, like your idea, your identity. Does it resonate with you, the term American Muslim?
Yes.
How so?
I mean, just like I prefer Yemeni American than American Muslim, because I mean the foundations of the United States were built with religion not in it, and that's something that the founding fathers says. That's very important. Is that religion is not part of the freedom of religion is in there. So the classification of an American Muslim or not, or to be honest, for me, it's not important. Yemeni American to me is what I prefer to be. If there would be a classification, I'm a Yemeni American. I'm not an American Muslim, or I'm an American. Being Muslim or being not Muslim, it's it's not important to anyone but me.
What are your hopes for the future?
Wow. That my children succeed in life. That's my personal hopes, but future happiness. I mean, happiness is, I think, everybody's looking for. I think there is more good than bad. The bad is louder. The bad is there because many of the good are quiet. Just like the problems when you ask about the events the terrible events that happen and are characterized as Muslim. There is an obligation. I mean, there's over, I don't know what the number is, but over 1.5 or over 1 billion Muslims in the world, and there are a handful of people making terrible events, and then it's being generalized. The majority of the Muslims should speak out a little bit more, I think, and I wish that out of this terrible events that are happening, that good would come out. So I hope for a better future, and I am optimistic that it will be a better future.
In closing, if you could tell one story from your life that captures what it means to you to be a Muslim in America, what would it be?
Um, I want to be happy. I want to be successful. I want to have a family. I want my children to have a happy life, and I want to retire and end my life. It has nothing to do with being a Muslim or not. It's just like everybody else's. That's it.
Thank you, Hazim. On behalf of the Virginia B. Ball Center Seminar, Muslims in Muncie, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today.
It's been a pleasure. I hope I answered all your questions. Uh, I hope I answered all your questions.